Hello and welcome to Growing Tech Fast, the Org3D podcast. We speak with people from the tech startup space about their journeys, their experiences, and the things they've learned along the way. Now, I'm delighted to be joined today by Steve Schaffer, advisor and investor to multiple startups, and the founder and former CEO of Offers.com. Steve, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks, Adam. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So, Steve, just to start with, for the benefit of our listeners, can you just tell us a bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I'm in Austin, Texas. I've been here since 2004. I moved here before everybody else started moving here. So, it's getting very, very popular for those of you who are not aware. It seems like every day someone else is moving to Austin. Before that, I spent 16 years in San Francisco or in the Silicon Valley area, kind of combination of both. And a little bit about myself. So I sold my startup Offers.com a bit more than 5 years ago to a company called Ziff Davis, which is a division of J2 Global. Mm-hmm. And I sold that in December of 2015. Offers is a leading coupon and deal website. It saves consumers money when they shop online with the best offers, promotions, deals, coupon codes. Since I sold the company, I am now a full-time mentor, early stage advisor, and investor in kind of startups. I really enjoy coaching entrepreneurs and helping them get to the next level. And I serve on a number of boards. I've actually done a lot of education over the last 12 months on being an effective board director, and I'm what's called NACD Directorship Certified. Anyway, I've been on a number of boards since I sold my company. Two in particular are a passion of mine. One is called First in Texas. These are two nonprofit boards. They promote robotics and robotics education to kindergarten through high schools. My son did the program, and it's just an excellent way to learn STEM, to learn business, to learn communication. And then I was also on the entrepreneur organization of Austin's board for a couple of years and ran the accelerator program here. And we had some great success helping companies take their business to the next level. I also today mentor through Capital Factory, Techstars, and EO, and personal referrals. Last year, I met with over 150 different companies. That's anywhere from 30 minutes to a couple of meetings. And those are really just my way of giving back. I'm an early stage investor. I've made 30 early stage investments. And today, I'm a strategic advisor and investor in a number of businesses. I look for high-tech and internet companies that have the potential to get to 100 million in revenue. Some of the current companies I invest include Fetch Package, which is kind of a last mile apartment package delivery company. LoudCrowd, which helps mainly e-commerce companies promote their, helps them get more and promote user-generated content on Instagram and social media. And then Yourself Online, which helps individuals manage their persona online and clean up their social media.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, you've obviously a lot of experience, and really looking forward to kind of digging into that further today. So thank you for that background. So you mentioned a few startups there you're currently actively investing in. So do you specifically invest in any particular areas of tech, or where are most of your investments on the whole?
Yeah, I actually look at a couple of different areas. When I first started investing after I sold, I was kind of like, oh, that's an interesting idea, or that's an interesting idea. And since then, I've kind of come up with my own set of criteria. Aside from the criteria, though, the most important thing for me is looking at the people and the plan, right? It's really what are we trying to accomplish as a company, or what are you trying to accomplish? And in that, I like to think about, is the market big enough? Do they really have a handle on the market? And then who is doing it and why? Right? It's really important for me to look at how the entrepreneurs got to the idea they did. you know, occasionally you'll just see another Me Too SaaS product, and it's like you go and do a little digging, and there's, you know, 10 companies doing the, you know, something really similar. That doesn't resonate with me as well as someone who's got some really unique problem that they identified, or a unique opportunity, and, you know, they're either first or they're the only one doing something that's different, and that's really a big part of what I look for.
Okay. Okay. So when you are obviously you founded a really successful business, you've then exited. There must be a few key ingredients then you look for in particular. So aside from what you just talked about there, what are the key things you would say? You know, what matters most basically for success in the startup tech world? Would you say?
It's kind of cliche, you know, but it's, everybody's like, oh, people, I invest in people. And it's really interesting because later stage investors, when the business is already proven, it's somewhat easier to pretend that it's just people, right? But you can't get to a certain stage unless the people also come with a plan or a vision or an idea, right? But let's assume you've got the plan, you've got the market, you've got the idea. You know, then to me it really does come down to the team. You know, why are they the right team? Is the team, or specifically the CEO, coachable, and do they have a growth mindset? And what I mean is, you know, I've met some entrepreneurs who are just brilliant, but that doesn't necessarily solve all of the problems, right? You've got to hire a great team, great people, and then know when to listen and when to learn. So I really focus on people with a growth mindset. I also look for the roles, right? I did a meeting recently with some entrepreneurs, and I said, well, so what are everybody's roles? And he's like, oh, well, I'm in charge of this and I'm in charge of that. And I'm like, well, who's the CEO? And he's like, well, we're co-CEOs. I'm like, well, okay. And when I talked to one of the other entrepreneurs, I got a different story. So I really got to really want to make sure the roles are clear, right? Who's really in charge, especially when there's co-founders, right? When there's not co-founders, it's less of an issue. And then one other rule that I have is that if it's a first-time entrepreneur, I like to know they have a coach or an advisor that acts as a coach before I'll invest. Okay. And that doesn't have to be me. It can be me. But I have to know they've got somebody they can call when the going gets tough that can help them talk through a problem at moment's notice. And it's really a really underappreciated point to success for first-time entrepreneurs.
Okay. So you talk there a lot about the people aspect. So when you are looking at an investment, how important is the actual product?
Well, it's crucial. You can't get to the, like, again, without a good product or a plan or a vision. I invest pretty early stage. So I invest in some companies where the vision is more important than the actual product, right? The vision, and I would argue the plan to get there, right? So people talk about the 3 Ps or the 4 Ps. Plan has to be one of those, right? Now, that doesn't mean we need an old-fashioned, business plan that's 37 pages. So I don't like that. But I do like to know in the founder's head that there really is a plan, and it's not just, well, we're going to make this up every day based on who we talk to last. That's a very, very common trait of first-time founders. It's, kind of like last person I talked to syndrome. It's probably got a good name that I don't know, but that's one that really, really concerns me when I run into that.
Okay. And then in terms of, say, strategy and kind of the vision for these companies, these guys are early stage, and I guess sometimes maybe they do need that mentorship, that coaching, and maybe their plans aren't quite up to scratch. So how kind of thorough, how comprehensive do you expect those plans to be when you first analyze an investment? Do you expect there to be some kind of naivety, I guess, in their plans, and kind of a little bit overlooked in certain areas?
Absolutely. I mean, I expect them to think they know what they're doing, but know enough to know that they don't, right?
Yeah.
If the vision is there, if the idea is big enough, the way I like to look at it and the way I like to coach entrepreneurs is a 5-year vision and a 90-day plan, right? Like, really, what are we going to try to get done in the next 90 days? And sometimes it's even the next 30 days if you're just in product build mode. But it really has to have a North Star. Where are we trying to go? What is the problem or opportunity we see that's going to build a big, successful company? Because without that, companies, in my experience, just meander, and it's just there's just too much, going back and forth that needs to be avoided.
Sure. Okay, so going back to your time with Offers.com, so how did you, along that journey, how often were you revisiting that plan and how it's been executed and making amendments along the way? And how different was that looking back at the end from where you started out?
Not enough. No,
Right.
so we actually pivoted 4 times in the 13 years that I ran the company, 13, 14 odd years. And that's a very common trait as well. It's more common, we were bootstrapped. So, the first attempt was to be a consulting company. And I quickly realized that if my clients didn't listen to everything we told them to do, and they, we couldn't control enough about their success. So we moved to a performance marketing model where we were still running paid search for companies, and then later SEO, but instead we were getting paid a transaction, kind of fee when whatever it was we promoted was sold. And over that time, we built over a dozen websites and used affiliate kind of relationships to manage those. And it wasn't until we were about halfway through the journey that, we got down to that, I don't know, 6th or 7th website. And I'm like, oh my God, this is just every time we build a new website, what a pain. Let's go find a real domain name and build a real company, right? And it took about a year from the time I talked to the owner of Offers.com till securing the domain. But once we had the domain, then I felt like we could build a real plan and a real vision. And that plan got sidestepped again by the Great Recession in 2008, 2009, because originally the plan for Offers.com was much more around financial services and financial products, and that the financial crisis just put an end to that. That was the worst time you could possibly do that, but it was a good time to build a coupon site. So we launched basically as a coupon on deals site in February of that year.
What was the biggest thing you learned that year then that maybe is quite applicable for the times right now?
Well, it's really to be realistic about the times we're in. Be realistic about what's going on around you, right? You can only control what you can control, right? In that particular case, I couldn't control the fact that for a year, credit card companies were not doing any marketing, right? And that was the backbone of the financial kind of affiliate business with credit cards. And we were a pretty big credit card affiliate in 2007, 2008. In the end of 2008, they all canceled their affiliate programs. So we had to really act quickly and shift what we were doing completely. And I actually did, since April, I think I've done 5 webinars about pivoting.
Right.
That was a double pivot. I mean, we literally were in the process of pivoting with Offers.com. In the middle of that, realized we were heading the wrong way and pivoted again before we even launched the site.
Okay, interesting. think when we've spoken before, you've talked about the importance of rhythm, so rhythm within in a tech startup. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, rhythm is one of those things that I think it's a great word to describe. It's kind of in a business what and how things happen on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, annual basis, right? I'm not a big believer, and one of the things I believe in is having a rolling 15-month forecast. I remember I was at a company when I was younger, and we started the budgeting process for the next year in October, and it wasn't done in January. So the marketing department, which I was part of, just went along with our plan. And by the time the budget was done at the end of January, we had spent our entire Q1 marketing budget, the first 2 weeks of January. Realized how inefficient that was, right? So I've adopted in the companies I advise, have tried to instill this, always 15-month rolling budgets and rolling forecasts. So that's an example of kind of rhythm. Now you want to look at it on an annual basis and just kind of do a check-in. But when we sit down in October to start doing the updated official budget for the following year, it's just refining at that point. A couple other examples on rhythm are kind of daily updates, whether that's full company daily update or at the team level, weekly one-on-ones, weekly team meetings. All of this structure is really important. People really do better with a form of structure, especially in a startup, which is chaos. Adding in the structure of rhythm can lead to some great success.
Interesting. Thank you for that. Okay, so coming back to we talked just before about what you look for within an investment. What are the red flags you're looking for?
Yeah.
From time to time.
I try not to look for the red flags, but when I see them, I try to give people a chance, right? I don't want to try to be judgmental and have this list of rules, but there are a couple. And again, since I'm interested in growth mindset and coachability, some of these red flags, if we can bring them down, if you will, that works, right? But one of the examples is when somebody says, we're the Amazon of this, or we're the Uber of that, I actually will laugh if they say it to me verbally. If I read it, I've actually not even met with some pitches where if they're, this one I saw recently was the Upwork of this, or whatever it was. And the analogy was so far not even close. I mean, the business, it wasn't even related. There was no way you could even draw that comparison. So it really told me that the founders didn't understand the business. They did not understand fundamentally what they were trying to build. And I don't know where that concept comes from. Occasionally it works, if you're in, if Uber's 3 years old and you're in Brazil and you're going to basically do the exact same thing Uber does, and Uber's not in Brazil yet, sure, you could be the Uber of Brazil, right? But given that Uber had global ambitions, unless you have global ambitions, you're really not the Uber of Brazil, right? And I don't know why I picked Brazil there, but I think I do remember reading about that one. So you just got to be really careful. So that's one of I've got a couple other favorites, but that's one that's just a bugaboo of mine. More because it suggests that the entrepreneur hasn't really thought about a good way to describe their business if they're relying on another business for that description.
Yeah, it's definitely becoming a bit cliche now to just draw those comparisons, isn't it? Without much thought. So that's interesting. And other red flags then? What else might you see from time to time when you're looking at a pitch?
Yeah, so inaccurate financials that really bug me. One of the examples is, there's a lot of marketplaces where they'll take gross merchandise value and they'll call it revenue, So we're going to do $1 million in revenue, next year kind of thing. And it's their take rate. Let's just say it's 10%. well, that means they're really doing 100,000 in revenue. Or if they're getting money on both sides of the equation, then maybe it's 150 or 200,000. Well, that's a very, very big difference. So if an entrepreneur thinks they're really running a company that's doing $1 million in revenue, you're going to make mistakes based on trying to think of it that way. So that really bugs me. But other inaccuracies in financials, I really like to see clean financials. It's really not that hard. I had an entrepreneur once who was like, well, yeah, they're a little bit of a mess, but we're going to hire a CFO with a Series A we're raising. I looked at him, I said, you're not raising a Series A with these financials. He says, well, you're the first one to say that to me. I said, well, I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. So they went out of business a year later. And, I don't think the entrepreneur was ever willing to admit that his poor financials played a big role in his inability to raise, the future funds. And then one more that really bugs me is when companies come in and, their second slide, and I see a lot of decks, it's all about the big TAM or the big SAM, right? Their total addressable market or the serviceable addressable market. And those are exciting to see at times, right? $1 trillion I saw recently, right? I said, well, great. So what's your potential? How much? Oh, I hadn't really thought about that yet. Well, you're missing the point, right? The idea of those concepts is to help you refine down to, well, okay, with your plan, how much can you get of that market, right? Let's say everything goes as planned, so even if you've got a multi-billion-dollar market, if you're charging, a tiny little bit per transaction, maybe you're charging a quarter per transaction in your marketplace, how big can your company be at 100% of that market, right? You're not going to get 100%, but I really like to see the businesses have thought through, there's 100 million consumers, there's 10 million that are likely to buy our product. Let's assume we get, 100,000 of them in year one, and they pay us $100. That kind of thinking is way more exciting to me than where they take the whole thing all the way through. It's not just, oh, this is $1 trillion addressable market.
Okay, interesting. Obviously, you strike me as someone that is very data-driven and analytical. Tell me this: have you ever made an investment on GutFeel, or do you always?
Yeah, I did. In fact, when I look at my investments, there's one in particular. I won't mention what it is, but I saw the pitch, love the concept. The CEO was charming, and it was a gut feel, but they did not have a plan to achieve what I saw as the vision, and it turns out their vision was different than my vision, right? I saw a super great concept, and they saw this, right? And the company's still around, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that things will work out. But that was a good learning lesson.
So should GutFeel always override data, or is there a time and a place where you have to stick to the process, stick to the methods?
Well, there's sometimes where you absolutely, you could have all the data in the world. Like one of the investments, I agreed to put some more money into a company this morning. It's a risky one, but I went in knowing how risky it is, right? So the hope is that the risk reward is there, right? So if it's not in an investing sense, if the opportunity is not big enough, then the data is even more important. But the bigger the opportunity, probably the more it is about gut feel and the less it is about data.
Okay, good, interesting. Thank you. So we haven't got too much time left, but just a few more things I do want to ask you. And I guess one would be just in your opinion, a bit of advice really. So if you were kind of speaking to any founders out there, any tech founders who are looking to to be successful in selling their company, or maybe they've got interest from a potential buyer. What advice would you give?
Yeah, that's I get those calls a lot since I sold my company, and I gotta so first is the what you're doing on a daily basis,
Mhm.
and then comes kind of the advice if your phone rings and somebody's like, hey, we'd like to talk to you about buying your company. But I always tell folks, even if you're not planning to sell the company, to be sales process ready, right? And what that means is that and it's just back to process, right? If you think about the 4 pillars, but it's really about, like, all of your contracts should be online in the cloud somewhere, that they're really, really organized, right? You've got the whole history of all your employees. You've got all the agreements where they sign the intellectual property rights agreements, right? So basically, always be ready to sell. If you meet someone tomorrow, you want to be able to basically give them access to your data room within 24 hours, right? And we ran the company that way. And when we did get some inbound interest, we were immediately able to go and start those conversations. But so that's one part. But the interesting advice I like to give folks, and I learned this at a conference I went to, is I call it, basically being honest with yourself, right? So before you start a process, and if you've got a partner, it's important your partner does this as well. If you're married, do this with your spouse, because this prevents most sales that don't close from closing, right? And that is, write down on a piece of paper the lowest amount you're willing to take for your business. You write it down on a piece of paper. And you got to be really honest with yourself. Now, you never want to tell the other side that number. You never want to tell, your team that number, right? That's the, if I can get $1 more than this, I am willing to move forward, right? You put it in an envelope, seal the envelope, sign it, and date it, right? And then put that somewhere safe, right? And what that to me does is it forces you to intellectualize and be realistic, right? I have a friend who went through this recently, and he did that. He wrote it down, met with his wife, they agreed on a price. The offer came in from the other side, didn't meet the price. So what did he do? He said, no, I'm sorry, right?
Yeah.
And when they did get to that price, then he felt good and was able to sell the business, right? And what happens if you don't do something like that? Now, the exact way you do it is up to you. But what I've seen when people don't do that is you get an offer in, somebody offers you whatever it is. Let's say they offer you $10 million and maybe your price was 8 million. You immediately jump to 15 million, right? And 10 may have been their best and final. And if they think you're at 15 and they're at 10, there's a reasonable chance they'll walk, because it's just too much ground to get up. Now, maybe you could get them up a little bit, but and that doesn't mean to take the first offer if they hit the number on the envelope. But what I've seen in negotiations is oftentimes a seller will just keep raising the amount that they want, and then a deal just doesn't happen.
Sure. Okay, I like it. Simple action, yet obviously very effective. I like it. Thank you for that. And I guess a final question, really, as we get towards the end of this episode. I guess I'd like to ask you is, looking back in your career now or your experiences to date, is there anything you've ever been told, whether it be by a mentor or another investor, that maybe at the time you didn't really appreciate, but maybe now looking back, it kind of makes sense and that advice adds up?
Yeah, and it's why I always, when I do tell people something that's hard news, I always like to make sure they understand the message. But I had a business in 2000, and we're kind of, it wasn't right working. The .com crash had happened already, and one of the investors was like, "Well, this would make a good lifestyle business." And at the time, that was true of just about every internet company, right? You couldn't raise money So what that meant is you had to figure out how to survive based on what you had, right? Assume no more capital is coming in, and how do you turn a business into profitability, grow a little slower, be a little bit more humble with your ideas of what you're trying to build. And I heard lifestyle business as, I don't know, pizza parlor, right?
Mm.
And by the way, nothing wrong with pizza parlor, right? I know a couple of people that own some really successful pizza parlors. But at the time, I was building this high-tech company, and I was really excited by the opportunity. But lifestyle business, most businesses are, it's not so bad. And I took it as a negative, as an insult. And what I really learned from that was, gosh, what do you mean by that? Would have been a much better response rather than the, I assumed I knew what he was talking about. Because what's funny is that if I had said, what do you mean by that? I think he may have been able to help me figure out how to transition to that method instead of, continuing to try to, do what was right by the investors. I think he had some other ideas that he was hinting at. And all I had to have asked was, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, Steve, it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much for your time today. Some really good insights in there, and some really useful nuggets. And I've certainly learned a lot from you myself today. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me, Adam.
No problem. And thank you to everyone who's listening. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Growing Tech Fast, and look forward to seeing you on the next one.